everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to another episode of Dinner with the Patins. My name is Michael.
And I'm Justin.
And we're married. And this evening we have an extra special dinner guest. You've seen her on Supernatural.
Oh my God.
And on CW's Arrow as Artemis for a couple seasons. She's all over your TVs.
All over.
All over.
Over those TVs.
Our beautiful friend, Madison McLaughlin,
Hi.
is with us this evening. And tonight we're having a pineapple stuffed with pineapple fried rice vegan. There's little bits of all kinds of vegetables and fruits in here. I put it together because the first time I ever cooked dinner for Madison, this is what I made. And so that was like 4 years ago.
Was it more?
Maybe
It might have
5.
been more.
Maybe more. But it's been a while. We've known Madison for like 5-6 years at this point.
Who's counting? I'm not.
You know.
It feels like a lifetime in like the best way.
The best way.
I don't remember life before, you guys.
Oh,
I know. I really don't.
Well, we met at church.
We did.
We met at a church that neither of us attend anymore. So, yeah.
Why is that?
Well, we just had some difference of opinions. And we're not going to go there. Try the food and see what that tastes like. And we have some Pinot Gris, you know.
Oh my gosh. This was really like, honestly, one of my favorite meals I've ever had.
That
happy.
makes me...
Because it's colorful, it's tropical, it makes you feel like you're on an island. It's delicious. Feels very like resorty. It feels very luxurious, you know? Feels very rich.
It's the plating.
Mm-hmm.
Also the flavor. It's very
The
yummy.
flavors are great.
Does it taste as good as
Makes
you
me so
remember?
I think it's better now.
Oh,
Nice.
I've honed
Well,
it.
because when I first had it, I don't know if I was already vegetarian or not the first time. Like, was I already vegetarian?
Yeah,
when
because
I
I made it specifically without... Because I was a vegetarian.
Right.
And we were talking about it, so I made...
So I was like new then. Because when I started Arrow, I was not vegetarian. And I was eating so much chicken as a part of like the superhero diet.
Protein.
Right. That like, I just kind of hit my lifetime max, I think. Because I already never was a fan of like grilled chicken breasts and like sauteed spinach, you know? It's never like my favorite. And so,
flavor.
well, yeah, after doing it for so long, I was like, I'm okay if I just like never eat it again. So that was like, it must have been like right before I met you guys then. Like within my first year of being a vegetarian.
Because when I had you guys over for dinner, I made some with chicken. And then some with vegan jackfruit and stuff.
And we had like a game night, right?
Had a game night. And it was like, I made one for me, you, and Mary, I think.
Yeah.
Were the 3 non-meat eaters. Now I eat meat. And she gives me a lot of crap about it. And she said, remember when you were a vegetarian? I'm like,
well, because it throws me off. Like, I'll be scrolling through Instagram and I'll see your stories and it's like a whole duck. And I'm like, but you were a vegan. And now you're not. Because you were more than because I was just a vegetarian. I didn't even call myself a vegetarian then. I was just like, I would go to places and they'd be like, oh, do you have any dietary restrictions? I'm like, well, I just like don't eat meat. And they were like, so you're a vegetarian? And I'd be like, I guess. I just hate labels, like with any aspect of my life. And yeah, and you were always like, yeah, I'm a vegan. And then you just started eating ducks out of nowhere.
well, you know how like, and I was going back and forth with this.
Well, because we were LA vegans.
It was like only like because I remember you saying you were like I'm vegan except for on holidays or my birthday or on like
weekend.
yeah
Or Thursday.
Or like after 11 o'clock at night.
you know, like whenever I feel like it.
No, I was pretty strict for a good 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
And then I found this butcher who would like give me whole ducks or rabbits or turkeys or
halal.
like that were just like alive, and then he'd like halal butcher them and hand them to me. And I was like, oh, I'm from a farm. I grew up on a farm, so I was like, this makes me feel like I'm home.
That I get, yeah.
And so, I mean, because you're from Louisiana, so you understand.
Yeah. And I mean, it's definitely, even then though, even when I was really little, it was like, I was always a very picky eater. Mm-hmm. And I'm never one to like, I mean, I give you shit about it because like, you guys are my dads. And I'm like, I feel like I'm allowed to.
You're her dad.
I don't know if you guys know that. We're actually like an actual family.
Can't you see?
Can't you see the resemblance? But I feel like I'm never one to like actually, I don't really believe in like restriction when it comes to food. So if it was a thing where if I was ever like, oh, I need that burger in my mouth right now, I don't think I would restrict myself. It's just that I don't have that craving just because I don't like meat. And I'm the person too where like I can never separate my emotions from anything.
You started as an actor when you were like little, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was always something that I wanted to do. Which I think is like that with most kids, you know. And I was also, I was like one of the youngest. I was my mom's first kid, but even like with all my cousins, I was the youngest, and I was like the youngest girl, so I always had this attention on me, and so I was always trying to like entertain people.
And you're a Scorpio. So.
And I'm a Scorpio, which is a huge factor. And I've always really, really loved feelings, like even the bad feelings. I just like I sounds so creepy. I like watching people feel things.
No, I get that.
And so I would love it when I could like do a play or like a monologue or whatever, or just like something that I would make up, and then it would like make people laugh or cry or it like would move them. I thought that was so interesting, and I liked being able to like, I felt like I was like one of the grown-ups when I could do that. And so I started that when I was super young, and I started like actual acting classes around the time that I was 6. And around like plays and stuff at the same time. And then moved to LA when I was 11, I think. And then I got my first like TV show when I was 15. It was The Mentalist.
The Mentalist. That was your first.
Yeah, it was with Simon Baker. He was really pretty.
He was pretty to look at.
Like, listen, that's one thing I will say about my career is a lot of people have this thing where they're like, oh, I always book things that always film in Atlanta, or I always book things where I like play this one type of character, or I always book things that film at this one studio lot. My constant has been that I always work with very attractive people. And like it is the nicest and also worst thing, because I would meet, and like it was cute when I was 15, you know, when I'd meet people and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you're on The Devil Wears Prada. Like, you're so pretty, you know? But now it's just uncomfortable sometimes, because it's like I'm working with people and I'm like, oh my God. Like, they're so nice.
Between Jared Padalecki and Stephen Amell.
Oh, the first time that I did, so I used to, this is so embarrassing. I don't know if I ever told you guys this. When I first started, so I was like 15 when I did The Mentalist and when I did Supernatural. And my first 2 shows, and they were within like 2 weeks of each other. And on Supernatural, I actually turned 16 on set, and I was like very wide-eyed and like excited. And I mean, I still am that way on set, but I was like, everything was new to me. I did not understand lighting. I didn't understand like anything. And so I documented everything on a flip camera. And I made vlogs.
Yes. Nice.
I think they're still...
Where are they?
I think I tried to delete them, but I'm pretty sure they're still out there, because every now and then I'll get tagged in like a GIF or something from one of them, and I'm like, how did you find it? But I mean, it's fun. It's just like embarrassing, because it's like, you know, nobody likes watching videos of them when they were like 15. But I remember editing the one that I did from Supernatural. And I was just like, it was me talking into this camera, and I'm like, and I'm in my wardrobe. It's a t-shirt. I'm so excited. And like,
that's so cute.
And
really
the
cute.
day that I met Jared, I cried, because I had loved Gilmore Girls. And he did actually the thing that I told him that I knew him from, which is true. It's like the first thing I saw him in, but I cannot believe I told him this to like his face. But I was like, I loved you in New York Minute, which is a Mary-Kate and Ashley movie. Yeah. And
what?
But like,
he was like,
it makes sense. Like,
he was in
child.
like his 7th season of Supernatural, had come off of this hugely successful run with Gilmore Girls, had done like all of these, you know, like movies and everything, and I was like, no, I love you in the Mary-Kate and Ashley movie.
And if I'm honest, that's something I want to hope to do one day, is like go up to, you know, like I'll run into Brad Pitt or George Clooney and be like, George, I loved you in Roseanne. Like,
Right?
but sincerely, like,
awful.
I loved you back then too, but you've also done great things.
Well, and that's not
like,
the only time. One time I
think
met
it's so
James
cool.
Marsden, and I told him that I loved him in this show that he did that I could only watch because they uploaded it in like 10-minute increments on YouTube. And I mentioned it to him, and he was like, Oh, okay. Like you
Yeah.
probably got a little scared.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, I have a history of doing that. But it was one of those, yeah, where I remember meeting Jared and I hadn't met him. We were like filming this scene and they were setting up. We were about to start filming and I was like, is he a real person? Like, where is he? You know?
The day I met you, I was singing at this church. Like I was on the worship team and
Singing very well, might I add.
Well, thank you.
Very pretty voice.
And
everybody go stream him on Spotify, wherever you find your music.
Wherever you find your music, you can or YouTube, whatever. But when I was singing there, and Justin hadn't started because it was a brand new church, and so it was the first Sunday I think, and I was sitting there on the front row waiting for things to get started, and people were filing in, and I was like, wide-eyed because I was like, Eric McCormick from Will and Grace
was there.
He was so nice.
And then you come in with JJ from Speechless.
Oh yeah.
And I was like,
Micah was there.
and Micah was there. Yeah, and I pull out my phone. I text Justin, who's at home, and I'm like, Justin, Eric McCormick's here. And the girl from Arrow, Artemis, she's here, and she came in with the JJ from Speechless. Why are they friends?
Which is why I went the next week. Because I was like, what is this church with these celebrities? No one was there. You were there. But
wow, no one was there. Thank you. Thanks.
I'm glad you were there. Because now you're my daughter. But
yes.
I was like, this is disappointing. Because the only one I knew, honestly, was JJ and... I knew about Will because I don't think I'd even watched Will and Grace at that point. Because
we were watching Arrow.
I wasn't
at
allowed
the time.
to watch Will and Grace growing
That's wild
up.
to me.
We were watching Arrow when I saw you walking by, and I was like,
so funny.
The girl that her parents died, and he was like, oh, because I couldn't remember the character's name.
I'm always the girl whose parents died.
Yeah.
Always. I'm always the girl whose parents died who happens to have a lot of weapons and Converse for some reason, like flannels. Like that's which is hilarious because it's
Butch
so
lesbian
not
assassin.
I mean, that's who I always play, and I love it. And I asked a casting director one time. I think I told you guys the story where I asked one of my casting friends. I was like, "What is it? Like, why am I?" Because it's so. I love playing it. Well, see, because one of my friends when I was like 16 was always like, it's because of your brow bones. And I was like, what, my brow bones? Like,
I think the eyes for sure.
But, well, what he said is he was like, no, it's your voice. Like, we can't have you come in and believe you as like a sweet, innocent, like annoyed teenage daughter. And I was like, interesting. Because like, that's who I am in real life. But it was because I remember my mom around the time that I was doing, I think it was like when I got, it might have been Supernatural, but it was something where it was like, it was kind of the second time I was playing the girl with no parents and a lot of weapons and like very troubled, And my mom was like, am I doing something wrong? Like, what's the energy that you're putting out there that this is the roles that you're getting? But I love it. I mean, it's one of those things where I'll talk to some of my friends who get like the nice pretty girl roles, And after a few years of doing it, they get really bored with it. And I've never been bored with any of the roles that I've done, even the ones I was on for like a longer time. So, I mean, I guess it's like...
I think that you definitely give off a very, not troubled, I think it's more like, I think it's actually more mature, like a youthful maturity, if that makes sense.
Oh, thank you.
Because even when you were playing a 15-year-old or 16-year-old on earlier.
Or like now, still playing a 16.
I mean, yeah, now you're still playing high school students, but you feel like you're not being led along by the adults.
Yeah,
like,
I got that a lot. Like even in my personal life, I was always told like, "Oh, you're such an old soul. You're wise beyond your years." Like I was always told that, and then it was interesting too because I think when I started working, I think it kind of solidified that. Because I felt a lot of pride in being able to play those roles. It was older. And then I felt very special because I was always the only kid on set. Like it was very, very rare that I ever worked with other kids. Whereas most of my friends who were actors that were my age were working on shows like on Disney or Nick or even shows where they had like a bunch of siblings.
Right.
So, there was a more youthful energy on set. And I always felt like I was like, like one of the grown-ups.
Yeah.
And it was so cool because, people really, maybe it was because I kind of came across as older, but nobody treated me like a little kid on set, which I really like it made me feel very special. And,
Right.
You know, I
And
feel
I think-
like I learned a lot.
And I think
because of that.
you get a special, opportunity to learn from more seasoned actors that way.
Yeah, I remember one episode of Major Crimes that we did. We had all of these incredible actors on, and like Craig Schaefer was there, and like all these like actors who I've admired in all these different roles over the years, and I just kind of like stopped reading the script at one point and just kind of started like looking around and being like, what is my life? And that was how it was. I mean, Jensen, it's been what, like 10 years, and I'm still talking about how much I learned from Jensen, because my first episode of Supernatural was pretty much just me and him. And it was just so cool to be able to not only work with these people that I had watched, and respected and thought were really talented, but to be able to have them treat me as an equal and kind of like explain things to me and really like just kind of fully accept me as like an equal like
That's
scene
good.
partner,
Right.
It was something really, really fun for me. And I think I got lucky because I was so young. It was like before imposter syndrome settled in. And so I wasn't really self-conscious about it at all. I was able to just kind of be there and soak it all up and be really present, and for the first like couple of years of my career. And I wish that I had that same type of like blind confidence now. But I'm really happy that I had it when I was starting, because it allowed me to just like be totally in the moment,
Yeah. What would you say is, you've had a 10, 12 years span of career now.
Oh my God, that makes me feel so old.
But you're like not. That's what's wild.
The crazy thing is like, so my roommate, Samantha Henratty, who we all know and love.
Y'all love her.
Yellow Jackets on Showtime, you guys watch it. She's amazing.
She's amazing.
It's really fun because like whenever I feel old because I've been in it for 10 years, I look at her and she's been in it for 20 years, so then I feel young again.
Exactly.
Yeah,
She
so I
has
get to turn
been
to
in it
her. She's been in
forever.
it literally
Wait.
for 20 years because she started when she was like 6.
She was like in,
This is about you, but I was gonna say, what was her first? When
I
did
don't know
she
what her
start?
first was. She started around the time that she was 6.
Wow, like out
And
here.
because they were
Wow.
living in Arizona, and her sister were like scouted, and they would fly here, and she would do, I hope I get this right, I've heard her do enough like press junkets by now, but she started with like she booked one of her first roles. I can't remember if it was like a commercial. She did a ton of commercials. She did like iCarly, Drake and Josh, Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, and so she was just working all the time and which is really funny because we grew up auditioning together, and which is like how I met all of my friends. It's like what you do when you're a child actor. You just like meet people at either like auditions or City Walk. Those
You
are the
guys all
only
live-
two ways that you meet people.
You all lived in the same building.
A
too,
lot of
kind
us lived
right?
at Oakwood.
Or-
May it rest
yeah.
in peace.
it's no longer here.
It's no longer with us. But it was this apartment complex that at some point or another, like every child actor lived at. Like, Jennifer Love Hewitt, I think, started. Like, she lived there.
I've heard
and,
stories about Oakwood.
I got some stories. Like, when I was living there, there were so many, like, I'm trying to think, like, I don't know. I don't want to, like, say anyone's name who I'm not talking to anymore because that could be awkward.
You don't do that.
I get, like, a DM and they'll be like, what are you? But it was like, you would always see people because if people weren't living there, like, they had friends there. And so I would always see Samantha at auditions and at these places. And we, like, never talked. We would like see each other at auditions and be like, hi, like hope you're well, and like not talk, not really have a conversation. And so we became really, really close a couple years ago because we met at the church that we go to now.
I tried to get into acting in South Georgia from a young age, and we ended up going to some like, it wasn't Barbizon, but it was the same energy.
John Casablanca, probably.
Oh,
Yes,
I did that for a
John
second.
I did
Casablanca.
that too.
Yeah,
And I
me
took
too.
a course of acting, and the lady was like, maybe she was just great at acting too, but maybe she was actually impressed with me, and she was like,
sure she
there's
was.
something here. You've
So what
got a
happened?
face for comedy. And I was like, great, like how do I pursue that? And she was like, I don't know. And it's like, you're the teacher at this esteemed school, I think. But what happened for me and personally was we missed like 2 classes, and they're like, you have to take the whole season again. And we were all like, no.
I did John Casablanca, and I went the model track for a while.
Well, because you're very tall.
I'm
and
very
pretty.
tall.
And handsome.
And pretty, yeah.
Oh, thank
You
you.
got a nice
pretty,
little face
fella.
on you.
And I was really youthful.
You're still really youthful.
Whatever, yeah.
Anyway, but I enjoyed my experience, and so when you start talking about your experience, I was like, it wasn't a scam. Was it a scam?
It was a scam, but you may have been good enough to get out of the scam zone.
In your career, what's been the biggest lesson you've learned? Whether it's professional or personal, what's like been the thing that is like, oh, this changed me?
I can't pick one, but I mean, I think there's a few that are, I don't know. I think there's two that are probably equal importance. One is more on the business side of just like, your team is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the people that you surround yourself with, you know, they need to be obviously really good at their jobs. You know, they need to be good agents and managers and publicists and whatever, you know, their role is, but they have to be like for you.
Yeah.
And I've been in situations where I've had people on my team that like that was just not the situation, you know? And I've been in offices where I was told that I have to like drastically change my appearance. I've been in offices where I was told that I would need to like have liposuction. I've been in offices where I was told that I needed to change my last name into more. So biologically, like my grandmother's maiden name was Sanchez, and one of my reps was like, no, you need to change that to play more into like the Hispanic side of your heritage, or the, you know, and it's like things that I just feel like you should make sure that the people that you're surrounding yourself with are people who are going to, like give you their opinions and stuff, but also like just be good people, you know? And that's something that I wish I knew when I was younger, because I did a lot of things and I allowed a lot of things because I thought that I had to.
Yeah.
You know, situations where things were really unhealthy and where I felt really like coerced and pushed into things that I didn't necessarily want to do, and that I would voice that. And I feel really, honestly, looking back, like kind of surprised that I would even feel comfortable to voice stuff. But I think it's because of how my mom raised me. You know, for the first few years of my life, like she was a single mom, and I was very much so raised with like, you know, if you feel something, you say it in like a respectful way. But so, and I look back and like I said that, you know, I was not comfortable with things and I was still really pushed into things that I didn't want. And so I think that's something that I always tell, you know, actors that are kind of starting their path is like, don't, like, it's not, if an agent or a job or like people for a role are telling you that you need to do things that you don't want to do, then that's not for you.
Right.
Yeah.
100.
And most of the times, like the things that I, you know, did change myself for were things that either I didn't end up getting or that didn't go forward or that I was miserable at. And because, you know, how could you be happy if you were like living this like version of yourself that's not you? I mean, yeah, we're acting, but leave the pretending for like actually on camera,
When
you
they say
know?
action.
Yeah,
so
you
true.
should never feel pushed or forced into something that you just in your gut don't feel comfortable doing. So that
And
was a
it's-
big lesson.
It's such a hard lesson to learn because you're like, oh, I want to make it.
That's the thing, and
I
everything,
wanna-
and the people who are the ones that kind of do this with more like younger or impressionable or more green talent are the people that are, they know that and they make it seem like this is your only shot, and they're like, listen, you know, we really want you for this role, but you have to do this, or you have to, or like, we really want to sign you, but for us to sign you, you have to do this thing, and they make it feel so fleeting. And I think that that's something that I wish I could go back and tell myself, is that like, or not even, because it's not necessarily that I have like regrets, but something I'm really happy that I learned was that like, if it doesn't feel right, it's not. And that's not the end of your career. Like missing one role or not signing with one agent. Honestly, if an agent is pressuring you into doing something that you don't want to do, you don't want them on your team anyway.
Yeah, because they're not looking out for you.
Yeah, they're not looking out for you. And it's also kind of like, even if you do book something that's huge and that like, you know, launches your career, for me, I'm like, I don't want to give anybody like that, like a platform. I don't want an agent who is really manipulative or inappropriate especially with, young
Right.
talent. Like, I would never want someone like that to be able to say, like, oh, yeah, well, I had Madison McLaughlin. I would never
Right.
want them to use my name to manipulate other people.
Yeah. I work on crew side as a set dresser, set decorator, production designer, whatever I can grab, non-union and in the union world as a set dresser. But there have been jobs I've been offered where I'm like, this doesn't feel right. And I've taken some because I'm like, oh, I feel desperate right now. And they're awful.
Your gut is always
They're
right.
terrible.
Always.
And then
Always right.
There's been some I've turned down. Sometimes nothing happens. Sometimes something really great comes along.
So the team that I'm with now, I love my team. I feel so supported. I feel like I could do anything in my life and they would have my back, and I think that that's how it should be with everyone in your circle, not just like with people you work with, but I feel like you should always feel like encouraged. Yeah, 100%. That was one of the things I learned from Steven on Arrow, is it was like there was this one instance where like there was something that, like, it's a long story, but there was something that this like creative member was really pressuring me to do, and I didn't feel like it made sense, and I didn't want to do it. And I'm always like I'm a person where I'm like, I will totally do a take that way, but I've been playing this role for this long, and like this is why I don't think it. You know what I mean? Like, and I was like trying to explain that in like a respectful way, which is also really scary, just like as like a woman on a show, especially as someone who is like not a main character on the show, to be like, actually that doesn't make sense. It's very scary to do that. And he was like, I was stressing myself out so much. I was like making myself sick. And Steven was like, just say no. And I was like, but I can't do that because
What do you mean?
I am scared. And I had
You're the
reason to
whole
be scared.
show.
Like I've known people who are not like high maintenance or bad people at all who've been like written out of shows because they would, and Steven really had my back, and he was like, okay, if you're like, is it really, like, he could see that it was really deeply upsetting me. And so he kind of like used his power as number one on our show to be like, no, like, you're not gonna, because things kind of escalated a little bit, and he really, really had my back. And he was like, no, you're not going to speak in that tone on my set. You're not going, like, to this other person. He was like, you're not going to treat her that way. Like, she knows her, like, she's already given you multiple takes like that. Let her do her thing. Like, let her do her job. And he just, like, totally had my back. And it was one of those things that I was like, oh, my gosh. Like, what? Like, like, you can use, like, you can, like, say
I
that.
have agency?
You can do that. And it was so, like, that's something that, I would see him do that for himself and for other actors on the show and other, like, writers and producers and other creatives and crew members on the show too. I found this team that's very patient with me and very gracious, and so.
And that, I think,
I'm
makes
learning.
your job so much better when you don't have to worry about whether or not your team is looking out for you.
Well, your team should always be protecting you. That's like one of the things that I always try to explain to my friends who are like, yeah, I'm not really happy with my team. Is it's like, if something happens on a set that you're not comfortable with, if they try to last minute, like, throw in, like, because this has happened to a bunch of my friends where it's like last minute, they'll be like, okay, actually, so we want you topless in this scene.
Yeah.
Right.
Or they'll be like, changing something that's a really big deal, and it's so uncomfortable, again, because you don't want that reputation of being difficult and like being, never hired again. And you don't want to make things awkward for your crew, and you don't, you know what I mean? And so you should have a team 100% where you can be like, okay, great. I just have to like go pee for a second real fast, turn off your mic, call your agent or your manager or your whoever, and be like, listen, this is happening. I'm really not okay with it. I told them that I like had explosive diarrhea, so I can buy you like 7 minutes. I need you guys to like figure it out, and then that's what your team should do. Is like, yes, their job is like get you the work, but I feel like a huge part of like what you need to think about when you're finding a team is making sure that they can protect you. I mean, it's the same thing like when you're dating, right? It's like worrying less about if the person likes you and worrying more about if you like them and if they're able to meet your needs. And I think that's something we forget a lot as actors and creatives, is it's like, because you want to work so bad and you just feel so happy that people are like looking at you and giving you the time of day, and you have to remember like, okay, but also, am I treated well?
This is good.
Is this
right?
healthy or not?
100%.
when you were starting out or when you were younger, was your mother someone that was like on set advocating for you? Because I've worked with younger actors whose parents, mother and father, have been on set and they're like very much involved with the process. Was your mom like that?
Yes and no. I mean, I was the oldest, and I was also like I mentioned, you know, two of my sisters are disabled, and so it was something where it was like my mom really trusted me to be able to like handle my own shit, you know.
As the
but
oldest.
she was also right. She was on set with me, like on every set from as long as I was under 18. I always had either my mom or my grandmother on set with me. But it was also one of those things where just how I was raised, it was like kind of, you advocate for yourself, you know. Like if I needed to, my mom would step in. Just recently over the summer, I was in Nashville filming something, and one of the days I was supposed to film, I actually ended up in the hospital with kidney stones.
I remember this.
And it was one of those things where like I was so like not well at all, but also really nervous about telling production that I had to go to the hospital, and to the point where I put it off for like hours. I was like, I'll probably be fine. Meanwhile, I'm like passing out. And so I was on the phone with my mom that whole time through my like different states of consciousness, and she fully advocated for me. Like she got my team on the phone in production, and they were so like overwhelmingly accommodating and kind and nice, and fully, you know, like had people drive me to the hospital, like take care of me. And
That's good.
Yeah, it was really nice. And I feel like as I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, that should just be the norm, but
I mean,
it's
should
really not.
be.
It's really not. And so I got very fortunate, but so I knew that I could always count on my mom to advocate for me, but it was also kind of, like I said, I feel like it was one of those things that I learned by being the only kid on most of the sets that I was on, as I was watching all these other actors advocate for themselves. And so I was kind of picking up those skills.
Right. We love Mama.
Yeah,
McLaughlin.
your mom's
Yeah. Mama Janice, Mama Jay. She, that's just kind of, she's just kind of a force of nature
She
in every
really
aspect
is.
of her life.
And
Yeah.
it seems like you've kind of picked up on that because you've always been, I don't necessarily want to say activist, but you've always been involved in causes. You've always been involved in promoting and fundraising and like, you know, teaching people about things.
Well, I mean, that's just kind of like, you know, how I was raised, because that's what I was always around. And my sisters have this really rare disease, as you guys know, but you guys may not. And this disease is so rare that there's literally less than 25 people in the world diagnosed with it. And so one of the first things that my mom said when we got the initial diagnosis back in like 2013 or 14, I think, was that, you know, she wanted to start a nonprofit to, yes, raise money for research and, you know, to find like different treatments and things, but also from like an advocacy standpoint. And so we finally did it. Only took us a pandemic, you know. So we've had this foundation up and running for a little over a year. We launched it on my birthday in 2020. It's called the MacPac Foundation.
The MacPac Foundation.
And you know, we're still very much so finding our footing, but even already it's been so cool just to, you know, like to watch it grow on like social media and within the rare disease community. And because we're not the only one, there's over 7,000 rare diseases. And I already had worked with Global Genes, which is a great hub of resources and information for different rare diseases. And so it's so cool to now be a part of like their foundation alliance and working with all these different, you know, nonprofits and advocates and stuff. And it's really cool. And, you know, my sisters are teenagers, and so they're
rock stars. Like
They
total
are
rock
awesome.
stars, so much cooler
I
than me.
love
Like
them.
people always roll people think I'm just being nice when I'm like, oh yeah, my sisters are so much better than me, and then they meet them and they're like,
No.
oh, you were right.
They're cool.
for sure.
Like
Right.
my sisters performed at Coachella, you guys. They were like,
Wait, did they?
They were in like a chorus for they performed with like Nick Cave. They've been on like Red Hot Chili Pepper albums. Like
What?
they performed for Obama. Okay,
And
they're so much cooler than I will ever be.
It had been a while because of the pandemic, and then we went to your folks' house for your birthday, and like I guess over the last year and a half, 2 years, we haven't seen your sisters, and so when we were there, I was kind of taken aback by how like
They've just
realized that they are.
They're
It's
fully
wild.
realized.
It's like
Because you think like younger sibling, and unfortunately, even in like you think handicapped people aren't going to. I hope that's even the right word. But
I mean,
people who
most
are disabled.
most people go with like
If
disabled.
they're disabled, you don't think they'll find themselves. But like,
And it wasn't even
that's on me.
surprised.
That's my fault, misunderstanding, and my own.
Right.
Lack
I
of
wasn't
ignorance.
even thinking in those terms. I was just like, they were like little girls, and now
Yeah.
they're like women.
I think that's happened with a lot of Gen Z, you know, is like they've watched how a lot of things have been handled by a lot of adults and grown-ups, and they've, instead of just kind of being like, well, I guess that's just how it is, there's this new sense of agency where it's like, yeah, no, I'm gonna
I
change
do love
it.
that about the Gen
And
Zs.
I think it's been something that's really interesting. And obviously, I don't want to like speak for Marissa and Marin, my sisters who are disabled, but like for them, you know, they have this whole community on social media of all these amazing disabled advocates, and it's been really interesting to watch them kind of find their identity and how much of that is rooted in their identity as a disabled person, but also like just other things that they're interested in. And I think it's like anything, you know, like I have parts of my identity that definitely like I cling to and that inform other parts of my life. And a huge thing I think that I talk a lot with the girls, and what we've tried to kind of talk about with the foundation, and hopefully like now that we have the foundation as a platform, we can talk more about it on there, but kind of other people's perceptions. And I really am happy that you said that, because that's something that they see a lot. But the difference is that most people, it's harder for them to like see disabled people as people.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's one of my sisters, like, my sisters hate the word inspirational because they're always told how inspirational they are. And it's never for, like, you know, because of how talented they are. Like, you know, they're both, like, amazing writers.
Yeah.
They're, like, very funny. They have these very dark senses of humor.
I was going to say, when we were at your birthday party, I was thrilled at how dark their sense of humor
my
was.
gosh.
Because I was like, that's me too.
Yeah, 100%. And like,
but it was so good.
But when people, they'll look at them, they're like, "Oh, you're, you know, such an inspiration."
You're doing
and talk about
the
like
thing.
how, and the girls are like, "I'm just sitting here. Like, what are you talking about? Like, go home, Karen." You know.
And I think that one of them made a joke like that, and I was like,
yeah, and it's so cool. And I feel like we're finally getting pieces of this type of representation in TV and film and in books and podcasts and on social media, which has been so cool to kind of watch them. Like, they've been obsessed with this show called Ordinary Joe lately, and it's this great new show, and there's this disabled kid on it, and he's so good, and they do such a good job of just kind of showing what life is as a, like, I don't know how old he's playing on the show. I think like 11 or 12, maybe 13.
Oh, wow.
But like as like this young kid with a disability, and the girls are obsessed with it because they've never seen that before. They're like, oh my gosh, they've had this whole show and they haven't talked about this kid's like identity rooted in like being a wheelchair user, you know. It's in like what he enjoys and what he likes, and like his fears around like his parents' relationship and all of this stuff. And he also has like a really dark sense of humor on the show, and so the girls are watching it and just, you know, so happy that and you can see too, because you can see people's like how people interact with you. When I was whenever I would hang out with Micah, who was JJ on Speechless, it was so cool to see people come up, because there would all the time be family members of, you know, usually parents or siblings of people who had CP. And they would come up and they'd be like, you know, like my kid or my brother or whatever, like the kids at his school now treat him as an equal because they've watched the show. And it's not like this foreign thing anymore. Yeah. And I think that's something that we're seeing, like, finally, you know, a little bit. We have a long way to go, but a little bit now.
And I'll be honest and say, I think my proximity to your family and your sisters, and even not just your sisters, but how your entire family kind of navigates the world of this rare disease and being differently abled, and like humanize it in a way for me that I've never been privy to. Yeah. And I appreciate that more than I think I've ever verbalized to you, because for the longest time. Not that I was making differently able people others,
Right.
but it was not
Well, 'cause
in
it's
my
just ignorance.
worldview.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
They weren't
because
there.
it's just there's no presence. It's like unless you know someone directly, there aren't. And the movies and TV shows that are out there are played by able-bodied people,
Exactly.
and by these non-disabled actors, and they're usually written by non-disabled people, and they're usually written from a frame of inspiration. And so it's like the sole existence of a disabled character is to inspire the non-disabled characters, and it's impossible to not transfer that if that's the only relationship you have to seeing disabled people into your own life. And so it's been really cool to be able to see my sisters kind of pave the way for a lot of their friends. Like even growing up, it was so cool because when they were little, when they were going to school or we'd be at the park or whatever, you would see these kids and they would be staring, and all the parents would be like, no, shh, they would shush them. And it would always drive me insane. And finally, as the girls got older, they would just be like, no, it's okay. He can ask questions. They can ask questions, because the kids are so curious. And when they're getting shushed, they're taught, oh, no, we don't talk about that. That's something different. That's something other. That's something shameful. And it was so cool for the girls to be able to be like, no, like, what are your questions? And typically the kids would just be like, why don't your legs work? And they'd be like, I don't know. They'd be like, I was born this way.
Yeah.
But and they were like, well, how do you do stuff? And they're like, oh, my mom helps me, or I have this wheelchair, or I have this walker, or whatever.
Yeah.
And they could be like, oh, okay. Like, can I push your wheelchair? And the girls would be like, yeah. As long as you're like careful,
Yeah.
And then it was like over it and they moved on. And so it was just like a lot of it, I think, is just people not understanding. And I think a lot of parents and adults are well-meaning and well-intentioned. They're like, shh, like, we don't talk about it. It's embarrassing. But what happens is then you have this disabled kid sitting there being like, okay, so now people look at me and they just shush and they like look away and and so it's been really interesting to kind of see this new wave of shows like Speechless and Ordinary Joe, kind of bringing that conversation into like every home of America. It's like so cool to see, because then there is this like trickle down effect that happens.
For sure. It normalizes it in a way.
That representation is so important.
Representation in general is very, very
so important. Yeah.
Because I feel like I've encountered people who are disabled that are assholes, and I'm like, I don't.
Listen, honestly, sometimes my sisters are assholes. Like, they're in wheelchairs and they're assholes sometimes. And I think it's so important that people see. That was one of the things I loved that Speechless did, was they had this whole story arc where JJ was just like, honestly, kind of a jerk.
He was a jerk.
And everybody was like, and that was what was so refreshing, was people were like annoyed by it.
Yeah.
And it was like, there's this thing that happens where, people are always like, I feel like taken aback when I'm like, people who don't know my family well, if I'm like venting about my sisters, because let's be real, Marissa's not a teenager anymore, she just turned 20, but I mean, I was, for a long time, it was 3 teenagers in one family. It's a lot. And so I would like be venting or something, and people would be like, you just called your disabled sister like mean, or like whatever. And I'm like,
She was
being
is
rude.
A person.
And I'll look at that, and it's been, and I think a huge piece of that's how my mom raised us, is we were always held accountable kind of in an equal way. It's like we always had chores that we always had to do. We always had, like expectations that were the same.
Once again, Mama Janice.
I know. She I think has it a little bit figured out.
Has it a little bit figured out.
Now, if she heard me saying that, she'd be like, what? She's like, I have literally nothing figured out.
Being the oldest sister in the situation where you have 2 disabled sisters, what was that like for you? Both when the diagnosis, because I know that I personally, watching you, see you kind of take on a lot of responsibility in regards to like getting your sisters to the hospital sometimes and spending the day there when they're getting their transfusions and things like that. What I've always wanted to ask you this, just I've never asked it.
I know, I feel like we're talking about stuff we haven't talked about in years, like the whole time we've known each other. This is so fun.
But like, what was it that, like, how did you handle that? I mean, you're probably still handling it, but like, as a teenager, and then, or even younger, because the diagnosis was probably before you were a teenager. But like, is it just something that you always dealt with, or is it something that you're like, okay, Mom, you need to help me navigate this? Like, what is my responsibility? And,
I never asked my mom or anyone for help for a really long time, which I thought at the time meant that I was so strong. And it was like actually totally awful and detrimental, as most people learn at some point. So I was around 6 or 7 when Marissa first got sick, and for a long time we did not have a diagnosis. We just knew like it was classified as an undiagnosed leukodystrophy, which is just like a fancy medical word for saying like there were abnormalities in the white matter of her brain, and that was all we knew. And so it was kind of a lot of like trial and error, and like what works. And because of that there was no prognosis really. There was like, we're just gonna keep on trucking, Right. I mean, we were told the day that she got sick, we were told by doctors, it was September 29th, and we were told to treat every day like Christmas because she wasn't gonna make it to December. And that was September of 2002, and she just turned 20, so
give it up.
Yeah, and so it was one of those things, and that's a huge testament to my mom as well. My mom had this nursing background and is just honestly just a very stubborn woman, which a lot of
Louisiana baby.
It's a Louisiana in her, but a lot of parents in the rare disease community are, because you have to be. And and it makes sense because all these doctors have so many patients, but it's like your own body or your kid's body better than these doctors do. And so my mom was kind of an advocate when the girls were little before they could be. And so it was a lot of like, we just didn't really know. And my mom never sheltered me. I'm sure there were things that she might have like watered down to help me understand because I was so young, but she never sheltered me from any of it. She was always like, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. I would ask questions and she'd be like, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. She's like, I have the same question. And she always made sure that whenever, I was at appointments with them, I could ask questions to the doctors, and they would try to like direct their answer back to my mom. My mom would be like, no. She asked the question.
Wow.
And she did the same thing for Marissa and Marin. As they got older, they could ask their own questions about different surgeries and medications and stuff. And the doctor would try to always go back to the parent, and my mom would be like, why are you looking at me?
That so much.
And so we were kind of raised with that, which was huge. But I think there was this, I mean, I don't know if anybody's seen Encanto, but I'm so obsessed with Surface Pressure, which is like the song that Luisa sings. Which
is why I was like,
yeah.
I thought about you like the second time I watched
You are not the only person who's told me that. The amount of like text messages that I've gotten from my friends who will like send it to me and be like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine.
Okay?
I'm like, I'm in therapy, we're good. But I think, for a really long time it was something that I did really hugely struggle with. Specifically, like when I was 16, I had so much going on where my career was kind of taking off, and we had just gotten the diagnosis for my sisters, which by the way is called HBSL. At least that's what we call it, because the actual name is hypomyelination of the brainstem and spinal cord with spasticity in the lower limbs, and nobody's got time for that, so we call it
Not at
HBSL.
all.
And so we had just gotten the diagnosis, and I was working a lot, and I was kind of surrounding myself with these people that maybe I shouldn't have been surrounding myself with, as a lot of us do when we're 16, 17,
sure.
right. And it just kind of really, I just hit this point where it was like I was so desperate for like control, and I really had no outlet of processing my feelings. And so every time, every day I was just kind of like, I'm fine. Everything is fine. I can take this, and I can hold this, and I can do this, and I can do this. And I would never ask questions, and I would never ask for help. And it essentially landed me in a place where I was diagnosed with an eating disorder. I was in a situation where the majority of the people around me were really unhealthy. And I just was I ended up in this really, really dark space. And I ended up going to therapy, and slowly but surely kind of started to come to this place where I was understanding a lot and realizing that having your own needs is not a weakness. It's just like a human thing. It's just a part of the human experience. And I also understood that, I mean, you can't pour from an empty glass. Like, you can only take care of other people as well as you're taking care of yourself. and a bunch of other cliches.
But they're all
But
cliches
they're all
because they're true. Yeah.
They're all true. And it was something that I kind of, ended up coming to. And even now it's something I struggle with, I mean, that's, still in therapy, still going strong. And
right. I think partly why I resonate with you in a lot of ways is because we're both the oldest. And granted, my upbringing didn't have a lot of the same trials that yours did, but even just as the oldest child, you feel like, oh, I have these extra responsibilities, but also like I can't break down, otherwise the whole machine falls apart.
Oh yeah.
And I was even thinking today, I don't know that I give myself enough space with my family to fall apart when things are hard. I don't think I've maybe a few times with my mother, because that's my relationship with her, but the family as a whole, I don't think my
like you go to the family and you're strong.
And you have to be like you're strong. Like I'm the stable one.
You're sturdy.
I'm the sturdy one.
Yeah.
Because I was here first.
Yeah, and I think also with older siblings, there's this whole like TikTok trend talking about like being the eldest daughter, but I think it's like you really are a third parent. And sometimes a second parent in households where there's really only one active parent. And sometimes the main parent in a lot of households. And it's something where it's like you can be so young and suddenly have all this responsibility. And it's interesting because a lot of the compliments that I got as soon as Marissa was born, and especially once she got sick, a lot of the compliments that I got were, "You're such a good helper."
Same.
And so then you think, okay, that's how I get. If you're anything like me, it's like I need validation, I need attention, I need to know that I'm doing a good job. And the thing that I was told that the most about was when I was a good helper. And so I made it a point to prioritize being a good helper over anything else. And then it became this thing that I resented. Because around the time that I was 16 to 18, it was this thing where it was like, why is that the only time that I feel useful? Why is that the only time that I have purpose? I mean, cue Louisa, it was like, who am I if I can't be of service,
Right.
And so that's where things got a little messy.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that a lot of people who are in any type of caregiver or older sibling role come to, it's like, because the lines get blurred.
Yeah.
And I talk about that all the time with my sisters because it's like, I have, had a huge hand in raising them. And especially now that they're older, it's like, listen, I'm not here to be your mom. Like, you already have a mom. I'm here to be your sister. And so there's been a lot of times where I have to really, really watch myself. And when I've had a lot of conversations with them of like, I don't want to be the one like telling you what you have to do or like whatever, like I want to be able to just have that more sister relationship. And something interesting as an older sibling of like,
It really is.
how it affects your relationship. And I think, like you were saying, like you feel like you have to be strong. And just recently, I went through a breakup, which is sad.
Aww.
I know.
His
You guys know.
loss.
It's
His
fine.
loss.
Things are fine. We're good. Everything happens for a reason. Blah, blah, blah. Like, insert positivity here. But when it happened, it was one of those things where it was like, my first instinct is I was like, okay, now, because I was like going to see my sisters, and I was like, okay, now I have to act like everything is fine, and I have to pull myself together and, turn off my Taylor Swift, and I have to like be better and like suck up the tears. And then I was like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm like, I preach this thing constantly about how you have to be vulnerable and how emotions are like your strength and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, take 1 second of a look at my Instagram. I'm like, I'm such a hypocrite.
Yeah.
And so I went into the house and I saw my sisters and I was like, listen, family meeting time. And I kind of like literally sat them down and was like, so this thing happened. And, I was able to kind of talk about the things that I wanted to talk about and be like, no, I'm not ready to talk about that thing yet. And there was something so like freeing about being able to just feel things, because also, like you said, my sisters were just the coolest. And so they were able to kind of even frame things in a way that genuinely did make me feel better and kind of hold space for like my own emotions and everything. And then I didn't have to hide anything. We talked about it for a little while, and like, then we watched New Girl and we ate dinner and everything was
Okay.
fine. And I was like, wait, I just showed my emotions and cried in front of you guys and the world didn't end? Seems fake.
I had a similar moment. It was probably 2 Christmases ago. It was 2020. And everybody's nerves were frayed anyway. And we went to my parents' house in Kentucky, and my sisters were there, and everyone was just on edge because it was 2020, and I like exploded, and I'd never explode, and I never am like unhinged or show any frayed ends when it comes to my family. And my sister Crystal was like, what is happening? And like, because I was like, I cussed everybody out, like it was just a whole thing. And Crystal, she enjoyed it. Like, she was like, oh, you're human, great, love it. And my youngest sister Angel was like, kind of like, she didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, and my parents didn't either. My dad ended up coming into my room and like had giving me some wisdom, and I was like, I just don't understand how I'm supposed to handle these emotions and be this person in this family at the same time. But it was funny because like for months after that, it was the topic of conversation in my family that I exploded, and I was like, it's rare, don't expect it to happen again, but just know that I'm a human, and know that I have these emotions that oftentimes Justin's privy to, and that's that's the extent of it, but sometimes it bleeds out. And I think that it actually connected me with my family in a deeper way, because they were like, oh, you don't always have your shit together. And I was like, I rarely have my shit together, but I don't tell you that because I don't want you to worry, especially when, for me, being 3,000 miles away from the rest of my family, I don't want them to worry that I'm falling apart when I'm falling apart, because they can't do anything.
I remember the first time I fell apart in front of my sisters, I was like in the thick of the eating disorder, and I was losing my mind. And that's what happens when you don't eat and you don't sleep. And I had been up for these 3 roles that were all like dream roles. And it was to the point where we were having this conversation of like, okay, you can fly to London to do this one, and you can do this one on this side, and like this one. It was like so exciting and so fun. It was like the most that my career had ever been popping. I was like, I'm so cool and like successful. And then within 8 hours, they all fell through. And I did not know how to handle it. And I remember just like feeling so numb. And then I was in the dining room with my whole family, and I just fell apart. Like, what I would now call like a panic attack. Like, hyperventilating, sobbing. And I was it's like the whole time I was in it, I couldn't control it. And I felt so like all the things that I was feeling, but then I was also like, oh my God, I'm crying in front of everybody. Now they know that I have feelings. And I'm like, darn.
With all of the things that you've gone through in the journey, both as professional and personal, what would be the one lesson that you would give your younger self? We can say 15-year-old you. Let's say 10 years ago, 16-year-old you. What would be the one piece of advice?
16-year-old Madison needed a lot of advice. 16-year-old Madison was trying her best and was overwhelmed. And I would say, I don't have any regrets. I wouldn't change anything, but I do wish that people who are where I was then, I wish you were just like, I don't know how to say it. I guess I wish somebody would have told me that it's okay to like give yourself permission to fall apart. Because every time that I came close to being out of control, which, let's face it, is every single day, because we're never in control. Control is a sham. It does not exist.
Preach.
And whenever I would be faced with that reality, I would fall apart a little bit, and then be like, gotta put myself back together really fast, because I need to be perfect, because I have to be this thing for all of these people. And that resulted in a lot of things that, you know, I'm in therapy for now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the biggest thing would just be that, you know, it's not like woo woo to take care of yourself. Like, I always thought of like self-care and therapy and like those mental check-ins with yourself. I always thought that that was great for some people, but that was not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was stronger than that, and I was, you know, older and more mature, and I did not need that, and that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, it's something that I wish I would have learned to just like embrace the mess and lean into it and lean into the feelings, because actually what I was so terrified of is I was so scared that if I fell apart, that it would make me a bad sister or a bad actor or a bad girlfriend or a bad friend. And what it actually did when I actually learned how to navigate those emotions and fall apart and feel things is it made me better at all of those things.
Better.
It made me a way better actor. I mean, have you seen my older shit? It's like, like, listen, I got a long way to go, but I look back at some of the stuff I did when I was that age and I'm like, what was I doing? Like, everything was pretend, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just like it wasn't connected emotionally because I wasn't in a place where I was connected with myself emotionally or with my own body. And that was something where, again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, is there were a lot of instances when I was a 16-year-old girl where I said yes to a lot of things that I didn't want to say yes to, or where I tried to say no to things and I was overpowered. And I wish that I would have known that that wasn't okay.
Yeah.
That, like, I, you know, because there were things where it was like, oh, well, that's normal. And that's just what happens, you know, that's just how boys are. That's just how the industry is. That's just how life is, you know, like, toughen up, rub some dirt on it kind of a thing. And it's like, I look back at the shit that 16-year-old Madison went through and I'm like, no, that actually wasn't okay.
Yeah.
And it's actually totally valid that my gut was telling me that it was wrong.
Yeah.
And I was having all these people being like, no, like, justifying it and whatever. And I think that's something, like, I've learned to really value my instinct. And I think that's something that I'm really, like, I really cling tightly to now is, you know, if my gut says something, I listen to it because it's never been wrong. Even when I've been like, you're wrong! It's never wrong. Ever. Even when I really want it to be.
Right.
Never is.
Well, I think I can speak for both of us when I say I love who you are and who you're becoming, and I'm honored to even be in the proximity I am to who you're becoming, like, because you're taking so much agency in those things that I think even before we knew you weren't allowing yourself to.
Yeah.
And it's making you, even like you said, it's just making you better. I think as a person it makes you better, and I'm glad that we know the Madison now. And
First of all, thank
16-year-old
you.
Madison, I'm sure she had her own. Like, she was
was
legit.
trying.
You know,
She
we
was
would
trying.
love. We would have loved her, but
we would have loved 16-year-old
Yeah.
Madison, but I love
I
this
love
Madison
this
now.
Madison.
Well, I think it's like, I mean, let's be real. Like, a huge factor in the growth that you guys have seen happen in me and, like, my life and the people that are surrounding me and, like, how I live and lead my life are from you guys. And I mean, like, our little family that we've built, I mean, you guys were the ones to be like, what are you doing? Don't let yourself be treated like that. You were the ones who were like, stop lying to yourself. Stop putting all this pressure on yourself. Stop holding it in. I mean, there's been countless times where I've been like, no, I'm fine. Everything is really fine. And I'm actually really great. And
Like,
everything is
Madison,
great.
tell your face.
And you guys, right. And you guys, like, would see that and would challenge me to really, you know, deal with it. And also provide this space that was always like, you know, I knew, like, when we were meeting every Thursday night to hang out, it was like, I knew that whole week when I was, like, pushing myself to like carry everything, I knew that I had Thursday to look forward to. I knew that I had Thursday night and I was going to see you guys and I could breathe.
Yeah.
And I feel like everybody needs those people in their life. And for me, you guys are those people.
And I would say that about and I know for myself, those Thursday nights, you know, it's kind of sad sometimes to think that we don't do that as much anymore. But even to just be able to, because there were conversations that we would have on those Thursday nights where I would be like, when I was that age, we just called that post-college sadness, but you guys are like, no, you need to go get help about that. And I was like, well, we all were, like, literally, we graduated from college, and everyone in my friend group at that time
Y'all were depressed.
We were depressed.
Yeah.
And weren't calling it that. We were just like, we just gotta power through, and we're like falling apart, but like trying not to, and not, you know, being lost and confused and all those things that in our minds at that time, we were like, it's not okay to feel those things, so we're going to ignore that we feel that way, except when we can't.
I feel like most people can relate to a point where it's like there's been a time in your life where you've been going through it and you haven't felt allowed to. Like, you haven't given yourself that permission, and other people haven't given you that space to, whether it's like in your family or your school or your friends or whatever it is, like where you feel like you haven't been given that space to process things. And so you're like, I'm fine, until you eventually just kind of fall apart.
Yeah.
Because you're just ignoring all of these.
The signs that are saying that you're not, like, you know, you're not fine.
Yeah.
But you're like, oh, it's normal because all of my friends are going through it too, or all of, like, this is again just normalizing it. Like, oh, that's just the industry. That's just being in your 20s. That's just being the oldest. That's just, you know, whatever. And it's like that's like, it's actually not okay, and it actually is. Like I really do lately. I guess it's because I've hit like the 10 years since I was 16, and 16 was such a big year for me. Where it's like I kind of look back, and now I don't even see. Most of the time, I don't even see me. I just see this like kid. I see this like 16-year-old baby who is in way over her head, and I just want to be like, dude, like, you're so young, like it's okay, you know. And I feel like even now I really have to check myself and be like, like, I'm doing it again. Like, I'm not holding compassion for myself. I'm not being gentle and being patient. And I think that's something where it's like, I think all three of us, like, just knowing the stories that I know about you guys, I think we've all kind of done that, where it's like you have so much compassion and generosity towards other people. And then when it comes to you, you're like, why am I so stressed?
Yeah.
Oh, because I haven't been dealing with anything. I haven't spent any time on myself.
Because I am not being patient with myself.
Yeah, because I think I'm a sack of crap.
Right.
Everyone else needs help, but they're great too, but I'm awful.
I'm over here a big pile of poo. It's like everybody else deserves to fall apart, but not me.
Not me, yeah.
I don't deserve that. Yeah, it's like that applies to everyone else. I feel that a lot of times, like, I have to really catch myself on social media, because I'll like get on the soapbox sometimes, as I'm sure you guys have seen. I know you guys have seen, because you guys have like talked to me about it. Where I'll make these videos where I'm like, have you eaten today? Have you taken care of yourself? Are you being nice to yourself? What's one thing you like about yourself? And then I'm over like to myself, like, crying because I can't fit in a parallel parking space because I have a huge car and I'm trying to fit in this space that's meant for like a smart car. And I'm like, why am I so dumb? And I'm like being so mean to myself. I haven't eaten, you know, in like 9 hours. Like, it's just so.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that we can, you know, put together a space, a dinner that we can give ourselves some space to kind of talk about these things and feel these things and let each other know that we're not alone and all of the things that we fumble through on this journey we call life. Before we kind of end this episode, you can tell everybody where they can find you on social media, and, you know, where they can find things about MacPac Foundation.
Is it bad that I don't even know what my social media handles are?
Madison McLaughlin.
I think. Yeah, because when my mom got married and she took the name McLaughlin, I had to learn how to spell it, and I was very bad at spelling. I am very bad at spelling. It didn't go away. And the only way I could remember it is like McLaughlin, you know? And so, yeah, Madison McLaughlin. I just know it's usually a picture of me and Ezra, or a picture of me in red lipstick.
Because those are the two things she loves most in the world.
Red lipstick and my dog. That's it.
And Taylor Swift.
Listen, let's be real. The reason I love
Taylor,
red lipstick is because like, I was 16 when Red came out. Okay, like that was my era. But yeah, so I mean, on like, that's me on like Instagram, TikTok, Twitter,
all the things.
And then MacPac Foundation is just like at MacPac Foundation. That one I know. And yeah, I mean, we're doing, we're always trying to do like fundraising, but we're really trying to focus on like, my sisters have actually written a few like little blog post kind of, and we have a few more that are going to be coming out soon where they kind of, if you want to kind of challenge your own perception of what disability is.
Which I would encourage everyone to do. I think
Yeah.
that I'm doing that myself now, like just trying to challenge my viewpoint of disability and people with disabilities, because we're conditioned.
And I mean, everyone's experience is different, and all my sisters can talk about is their experience, but I think it is interesting to just listen to these two, Gen Zers. I have 3 sisters, and the 2 that often write the stuff, the 2 who have HBSL are 20 and 15, which makes me feel so old, but we will not talk about that right now. And yeah, they just, I've been really, really floored by them, honestly. They are very vulnerable and very honest about their experience. And all parts of it, the discrimination that they experience. I mean, you guys, airplanes are still not accessible somehow.
Which we said that before, and I was like, I feel like shit because I didn't even realize.
Why would you? It's like, and that's why I think it's so cool. My sisters are talking about this, and there's a lot of other advocates too. It's like there are people who straight up died because they've died because of how inaccessible planes are. And it's still something that people are just kind of like, oh, it's only the disabled people, so we won't really, address that. And so it's really cool with social media seeing that it's, people are finding their voice and able to share their experiences. And now people who wouldn't normally think about that are able to read articles and watch videos and stuff. So that's what we're kind of leaning towards for the new year, doing with the foundation, is just a really big push on awareness and just kind of helping people open their minds, because no, it's not wrong that you didn't think about accessibility in planes, because why would you? And so that's kind of what we're trying to do with the foundation, is kind of create this dialogue and kind of shine a light on these things that otherwise, why would you think about it? Yeah. And so it's cool to, to kind of have Marissa and Marin and a few other advocates and just kind of, talk about their experience so that we can hopefully get some movement going.
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for eating dinner with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I've been talking so much. I'm going to finish it, I promise.
Chow down now.
That we're done.
We're going to let her finish eating. Thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Dinner with the Patins. You can find our social media handles, Dinner with the Patins, official Michael.
Justin _AGA.
Thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.